Welcome back to Java Programming for Beginners, and today I'm going to talk about scope. And no, I'm not talking about sniper rifle scopes. Come on, guys. I'm talking about programming scope. So, like in programming, people a long time ago when programming was fairly new, people wanted to have variables that had the same name because well, in English, a lot of things are named the same thing, so why won't we be able to program with variables that have the same name? So eventually, someone came up with variable scope, which variable scope allows us to limit how long a variable, that's not true. It kind of changes the visibility of the variable. I think I like that better because it it changes the visibility of the variable pretty much. And so when you go to a different part of the program, you could have a variable with the same name, but it wouldn't be the same variable. And so it's a great thing to be able to do, but you need to understand how it works so you don't end up accessing the wrong variable. So variable scope is something very important to understand, and there's also method scope and class scope. So we'll be covering these as well. Well, class scope is kind of different. So when you saw me declare my main method, you've probably noticed that it's public, static, void, main, string args. And by now you know that string args is a parameter. You may not know what this is yet, which we'll get to very soon, actually. We're actually moving along very quickly. But you know if this is a parameter, you know this is the name of the method, you know this is the return type of the method, which this method doesn't return anything, so it's void. You know that static means it doesn't change, but public. Public is something we have not talked about, and this is the visibility of the method. And so public does not mean that anybody in the entire world can see this method. What it means is that a program outside of this program can reach in and call this method. And that's why it's important for our main method to be public, because we want Java to reach in and call it, because this is the entry point to our program, so we want this to be public. And then of course our class is public too, because we want it to be able to find the class. So I mean, it's things like this, and they're very, very important. Let's look at our person class. Now we have this method called void print, and we know that we can access it outside this class. So that means that the visibility of this method is public. Even though we haven't declared it public until now, it was already public before. We just didn't say that it was public. And it's a good thing to always go ahead and type in the visibility of your methods. That way you don't have to be like, wait, is it public by default or is it private by default? If it says public, you know what it means. So just go ahead and type those in. And so these kind of methods are very, very nice to have. And yeah, that's how public methods work. Now, this class, I picked this class to talk about because we don't actually want everything in this class to be public. And this is when we're going to start talking about variables. Because right now, take a guess at what kind of visibility this variable has. We haven't defined it, so it's probably public. If I go over to my main method and I say p.name is equal to then I can do that. And so basically, you have to think of this person as being a program in itself. And our main class is going to access our person program. and or object. You should probably think about it as an object. But really, I mean, think about it. Do you really want someone to be able to go through this person's file and be able to change the person's name without any kind of verification process or anything? It becomes a security issue. So you don't want this to be a public variable because any program can reach in and change it. So we're going to go over here and we're going to change the visibility to private. And we'll do the same for all these variables. And private means that this variable is only going to be accessible within the brackets that it's defined in. And so I can't go over to this main class anymore and say p.name. See, Eclipse isn't even going to give me a suggestion because it's like, whoa, this is private, you shouldn't be looking at this, or just don't do it. That's what Eclipse is telling you right now. But, you know, that's a very, very important thing to be able to do. And you can, so that's really how visibility works for methods and variables. That's not all I wanted to talk about. Public class. There's also a protected visibility, but I'm going to recommend you guys stay away from protected visibilities because they're really dangerous. Don't use those unless you know what you're doing. So let's look at our input class. You see how I have integer I equals 0 defined under my getInteger method. And you know, we could probably go ahead and change this to public. But we're going to talk a little bit more about scope. This integer I is defined under getInteger, which its brackets are right here. So if I go into another method and I try to say I equals 72, the program's like, I don't know what I is. So you guys want to think about why doesn't this method recognize what I is? And the reason why is because I is defined inside these brackets. And a variable defined inside a method is only accessible within that method. So I can't go to another method and try to access it. That's why we define our scanner at the top of our class, because our scanner is defined within the class, which is inside these brackets, which means I can access my scanner from any of this highlighted blue code because it's inside this bracket and the closing bracket for the class. Which, by the way, scanner should be private. Since we know that it should be, we should change it. But that's why I can't just define my scanner in my constructor, because then I won't be able to access it in my integer method, and I won't be able to access it in my getDouble method or my getString method, which also needs to be public. But that's why we do those things that way. So, hold on. If you look at my while loop, the same thing applies. I have a string called input defined inside these brackets. So if I go and out here and I try to say input equals, I don't have access to this variable because this variable only has scope in between these two brackets because that's where it's defined. Also try to remember that since the variable is defined right here, you can only access it from here down until it reaches the end of its bracket. And the reason why is because you can't access a variable that doesn't exist yet. I can't go up to this line and say input equals because look, once again, the variable doesn't exist yet because it doesn't get defined until this line. So you have to keep in mind, programming is sequential. All code is sequential, so you got to keep that in mind. The variable has to be defined before you can access it. And I think that's really how variable scope works. As far as classes go, I can't get into too much detail yet because we have just started working with multiple classes. But you can tell that my classes are defined under the default package. And you can have multiple packages in your program. But in order to access a class from a different package, you have to import it. So if you notice, like, you know how, gosh, to use our scanner, we had to import our scanner from the java.util package. And then the class name is scanner. So you might want to think about why I'm able to access my input class from here if I never imported it up here like I had to do for scanner. And the reason why is because the main class is in the same package as the input class and the person class. So these classes are already imported into this class by default. So I don't have to go in here and try to import those because it's already been imported for me. But when I try to access something that's outside of this package, I have to import it manually like I had to do for the scanner. Now, I know this might be a little much for you guys. I just talked for like 12 minutes about variable scope and visibility and stuff like this. But this kind of stuff is extremely important to program, and I really hope you guys listen to what I said because it will help you become a much better programmer. But I think that's all I'm going to talk about in this video. I'm finally done. But I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. That way you can see the rest of my videos. And if you have a question, make sure you ask it. There is no such thing as a dumb question when you're first learning how to program. I will answer your questions the best I can, and we'll get along just fine, I guess. As far as this tutorial series goes, we are moving along very quickly, and I plan on adding a lot more. I want to make sure we make a game before the end of this series, which we are on track to do. So make sure you guys keep watching, and I'll see you guys next time.